Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about people worrying about the law of accommodation who don't really need to worry about it yet. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And you know, this is a topic we need to talk about because the law of accommodation is something I've made quite a few videos about over the years discussing. And it looks like more YouTubers today are actually finally discussing it, but the problem is that it's being misunderstood. People who really don't need to worry about this yet are starting to worry about it and do things like, oh, I need to change exercises, rotate through exercises, things like that. All right, that's absurdity. And what do I mean, people worrying about that? Look, if you deadlift 380, 400 pounds, that's the most you can deadlift for a single rep. You have no need worrying about stuff like this. But the law of accommodation has basically been noted decades ago. Is that your body accommodates after about 3 weeks to any given training stimulus. People say, well, that means you need to change something, right? Yeah, but changing something really means only changing something. It doesn't mean you need to make a major change. What do I mean? If you've been using 100 pounds for 3 sets of 8 on a given exercise for 3 weeks, you're not going to get any bigger or stronger off of it anymore. Meaning you're going to stay exactly where you are. In other words, you're going to have to add a rep. You're going to have to add 2 pounds to the bar. You're going to have to do something. You're going to have to change your training stimulus because it's no longer a novel training stimulus. Your body, by about 3 weeks of that, is fully adapted to it. It's not going to adapt anymore. You're not going to grow anymore. You're not going to get bigger. You're not going to get stronger. Now, what that means for the more advanced lifter is, though, if you have maxed out your adaptation to a given stimulus, it should be easy to go ahead and improve and change something for the positive. Because once it gets really easy at the 100 pounds for 3 sets of 8, should start getting pretty easy after about 3 weeks, unless you're losing weight or you're overtraining. Should start getting pretty easy. Should be able to change something, improve something. Should be able to add a rep somewhere. So people say, well, why isn't this a concern for the novice lifter? Why isn't this a concern for someone who's only deadlifting 315 for 5 reps? Because you don't have a strength base yet. You can still use linear progression. Anyone who's capable of linear progression doesn't need to worry about the law of accommodation. Why in the world wouldn't you be adding weight all the time? If you add 5 pounds to the bar somewhere at least once over the next 3 weeks on one of your exercises, you've bypassed the law of accommodations. You've changed the training stimulus. If you've gained a rep somewhere, you're no longer stagnant. All right, you're no longer stagnant. Now, the West Side Barbell guys, who are the people who talk about this the most, Louis Simmons, how do they get around it? They run stuff in 6-week and 3-week waves. All right, all their max effort lifts, they change those lifts. They don't repeat the same max effort lift more than once every 6 weeks. That doesn't mean their accessory work isn't the same. And that's only 2 of their training days. They run their dynamic effort work in 3-week waves. They change their dynamic effort work every 3 weeks. Okay? And that change could be as simple as changing from bands to chains. And vice versa. And they can rotate between the two. So they do that in 3-week waves. And that's how they get around it, keeping you from adapting. But they might still do the same accessory exercises for months. They don't change everything. That's how they get around it. But you have to understand, they're running very complex concurrent style training. They're running a specific type of training. How does the rest of the world deal with it? Well, if you adapt to the same stress after 3 weeks, how is most periodization set up? So people are like worrying about it, and it's like, why? It should be addressed in your program already. You don't have to change exercises to get through the law of accommodation. You just have to change your reps and sets. So for example, let's say you're running linear periodization. Not even linear progression, but linear periodization, linear block periodization. How is it addressed in that? If your first 3 weeks you're doing 3 sets of 10, you'll do 3 sets of 8 the next 3 weeks. And then 3 sets of 5, or even 5 sets of 5 the next 3 weeks after that. You've stayed pretty close to what you're doing. I mean, is there a big difference between those two? Or those 3? Not really. All right, you've gone from doing 3 sets of 10, 30 reps, with probably something like 70% of your max on a given exercise. Next 3 weeks, you're doing, what, 75% for 3 sets of 8? Then you might do 5 sets of 5 with 80%. That's actually the hardest out of those 3. But if you just change the reps and sets every 3 weeks, even if they're not dramatic changes, going from 10 reps to 8 reps and then to 5 rep sets, you'll keep adapting. You've changed the training stimulus, even if you're doing the exact same exercises. You don't have to change exercises to bypass it. You have to change exercises to bypass it. In fact, if you're changing exercises all the time, you have no way to track progression. You guys need to remember, the only system that has you rotate through changing the exercises regularly, like with the Westside system, has you doing constant stuff in 3-week blocks also. Changing one exercise, basically 2 exercises, basically 2 sets per week are getting changed. Out of all the work that they're doing, the hours of work they're doing, they're only changing their max effort work. So if people who are intermediates can run linear periodization for a couple years and just do 3-week blocks of just changing the reps and sets in a progressive manner, if that completely bypasses the law of accommodations, does anyone who's not advanced need to sit around worrying about it? Are you writing your own programs as a non-advanced lifter? Are you telling me that you guys are writing your own programs as novice lifters or intermediate lifters? You shouldn't be. You shouldn't be. And again, people are misunderstanding it. It's not a bad thing if you're somewhat stagnant for 3 weeks, because then after 3 weeks you can change your stimulus. Okay? Not the end of the world. People are acting like the law of accommodation is some big negative, terrible thing. No, it means that your body does adapt. Because if you've adapted to something, the adaptation is positive. Meaning, if you've been doing something that initially stimulates adaptation, you get bigger and stronger from doing 3 sets of 8, and you continue to do it for 3 weeks, you've gotten bigger and stronger. You're now adapted. You guys understand what the adaptation means? It means that it's now too easy for you. You've gotten everything you're going to get out of it. That means you've improved. The law of adaptation doesn't exist because there's some magical system that says, well, if you stop here, there's no more progress. No, it's because you've already made the progress for the work. When you understand it in a positive light, the law of adaptation is basically saying you have to increase workload. You've got to change something. You've got to give some novel stimulus, because you can only get so big and so strong from doing the exact same thing over and over. You have to increase the workload or the tension in some way over time. Because eventually you're just going to get too good for that work to improve you any further. When you look at it from that perspective and you understand that the law of adaptation isn't a bad thing, people are trying to make it out now like, oh, it's a terrible thing. Well, no, it's not a terrible thing. It just means that after 3 weeks of doing something, you've probably gotten all you're going to get out of it. You've gotten as good as you're going to get from doing that. You're going to have to do something that stimulates you differently, that gives your body a reason to improve further, because the human body doesn't improve unless you give it a reason to do so. It doesn't just do things randomly. It doesn't just get bigger or stronger or faster randomly. You've got to actually cause it to want to do that. You've got to create the need for it to do that. That's all it really is, guys. Really, the law of accommodation is just a different way of looking at progressive overload. Okay, and you shouldn't have to worry about this 3-week lull when you're still building a foundation, because you should be able to improve on something at least every week. Your squat, your deadlift, your bench press, your chin-ups, something, if you haven't built a solid foundation yet, should be improving on a weekly basis. And if something is improving on a weekly basis, 3 weeks is an eternity. For the novice lifter, 3 weeks really is an eternity. All right, you should be able to make as much progress in 3 weeks in your first 6 months training as an advanced lifter makes in an entire year sometimes. All right, 3 weeks is like a year. It's like a year's worth of stuff for the novice. So no, they don't need to be tied up in thinking about stuff like that. They're overly complicating it. What the novice needs to understand, or the person who's only deadlifting 350, 380 pounds, what that guy needs to understand about the law of accommodation is that you're going to have to do more work if you want to improve. But a good program will have you continually trying to do more work when you're at that level. Straight linear progression will get you through the law of accommodation for at least an entire year, if not more, of your training. Okay, it will absolutely get you past it. You don't even need to worry about it. When you start getting to 450-pound deadlift, something like that, the law of accommodation might actually start to matter. You might need to start thinking in terms of 3-week blocks. All right, that's all that really means, which is what most linear periodization and block periodization is based on anyways. So it's already addressed. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.